Let me know. Are we live? Okay. Well, hey, everybody. Thank y'all for joining in. For those of you that YouTube's not live yet. I just got word. So for those of you that are watching on Facebook while we're waiting on getting YouTube up, now YouTube is up. So if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, thanks for joining in to this conversation tonight. This is a bit of a community forum where we get an opportunity to just spend some time really together as a community and bring some of the hard questions of our hearts to the table. And I know much of the questions that are circulating throughout our community and throughout our homes and in our conversations with other relationships, quite honestly, are really directed towards this national crisis that we're experiencing. And we're wondering, like, how are we preparing ourselves to make sure that things such as police brutality don't find their way into our communities, or riots? How can we make sure that our communities are protected and we're ahead of that? Well, that's part of what this conversation is about tonight. As we get the opportunity to ask some of the hard questions that we've been hearing from you, we have different community leaders from a variety of different leadership roles in our community that are going to ask those hard questions towards our local leaders of our law enforcement agencies. We have Sheriff Blackman here from the Sheriff's Department. We also have Chief Hoagland here from Sebring Police Department, and Chief Fansler from Lake Placid Police Department. For those of you that are in Lake Placid and you were planning on doing the Peace Walk and it got rained out tonight, we're sorry that happened. We do appreciate you making the effort to exercise your right for peaceful protest. We respect that, we support that, and we hope that you're able to do that again soon. But thanks for tuning in tonight in this conversation. Let me just kind of set the tone for what this is all about. Yes, we're going to be asking some of the hard questions to our local law enforcement leaders, but this is just the beginning of an ongoing conversation that we as a community are going to have to continue to have together across dinner tables, across boardrooms, from cubicle to cubicle, from friend to friend on the golf course and on the basketball court. These are the kind of conversations that bring healing, because truly we believe that it's conversations that can cure our culture. I do want to say personally, just as a pastor here in this community, I'm Dustin, by the way. Everybody that you're going to hear from tonight, in a very deep human way, is grieving. We feel the deep pains. We hear the cries. We are walking through this very difficult and dark time together. But we know that in order for us to arrive at the same place together, we're going to have to start talking. And it should have happened a long time ago. It's stuff that we can no longer sweep under the rug, but we need to start looking at our brothers and sisters of a variety of different cultures and having conversations, learning one another, informing one another of where we're at and how we feel and what we're experiencing, and truly putting ourselves in a position to love one another. And so tonight we're going to open up this conversation together, and I can tell you our ultimate goal in our time together tonight is not to figure out how we can move past this, because we want to stop feeling the feelings. Our goal tonight as a community is to begin the conversations of how do we never come back to a place like this ever again. We really want to be healed and we want to be better. And I can tell you the three guys that are wearing uniforms tonight, they can't fix it for us. They are a big part of the solution, but it's we as a community that are going to be the real solution to this in our community. So thanks for leaning in. If you are watching online on social media, would you please take a moment to share this so that it's on your page, and leave us a comment. Let us know you're here. And as you are leaning in tonight, you can comment and ask your questions. We will try at the end to get to some questions if we don't get to it in our normal conversation. But just know we may not get to any questions tonight, possibly for the sake of time, but we certainly hope to. If we don't get to your specific question and it doesn't get addressed tonight, please, each one of these leaders would love to hear from you. If you have a question for one of our law enforcement agencies or even one of the leaders you see on the stage, the phone lines are open. And so please give them a call and sit down and continue to have this conversation together. But let me begin by asking really the big question that we're going to fill in a lot of layers as the night goes on. And so I told these gentlemen not to not to use all of their stuff on this first question, but I'm going to direct this one at Sheriff Blackman. Obviously, our Sheriff's Department is the largest, most complex of the agencies, and so this is one that he may fill in a lot of gaps for us right out of the bat. I know this is one of the things that our community's wondering, Sheriff, but how are our law enforcement agencies working towards ensuring that we're ready, trained and ahead of the curve concerning the kind of crises, for example, not just police brutality, but also the rioting, the looting that's happening around the country. How are we working to get ahead of that here in our community?
So we at the Sheriff's Office, and not just the Sheriff's Office, but within our entire community, I think we're not seeing some of these issues that we're seeing around the country because of the type of community we are. We're a very, very close community. I might not know a particular individual, but generally I know someone in his or her family. And that communication is the key to that. The community that we are and the community that myself and these other two guys get the honor to serve, we want to see that continue, and we want to see that continue to grow and come closer as we move forward. But specifically to your question, what have we done to prepare in case we are faced with something like that? So earlier, or in the late part of last year, not knowing that this was on the forefront, we sent 6 individuals to Louisiana to receive the latest training when it comes to field force or riot response. We sent 6 guys out there to be trained, to come back to train the rest of our Sheriff's Office, in which they did. We trained both our law enforcement side, our detention side, and field force tactics, field force response, and riot response. We're using both as far as manpower-wise. So our law enforcement would be the front line. They would go in and handle a situation. They would maybe break out a subject that was causing a disturbance or being the antagonist person in the crowd. And then the detention staff would move in afterwards because they're used to going hands-on every single day, and they would remove the subject from the crowd. So we're prepared to do that, and we've done that through training, and everybody at the Sheriff's Office has been trained. We've made sure that we've got all the equipment that is needed, all the gases, the OC sprays, and the chemical irritants, that we have those available for our men and women if we're called to take action. We've also made sure that all of our equipment is ready to go, and that's the specialty equipment, command posts, specialty vehicles that we might use to disperse a crowd. We've also got technology available to us that we can put up in the air so that we can get the feel of a crowd and kind of see which way it's moving, and if we need to, try to move it in a direction where we need it to move to, so it's beneficial to us and those involved. So we're ready to do that. And then we're also standing by. If we start seeing problems at night, we're ready to enact a curfew. We do not want to do that as we're just coming out of one of the phases with this COVID-19. Our businesses are starting to get back going again. So we certainly do not want to enact any type of curfew at this point. But if we do that, we will immediately go to what we call an Alpha Bravo, and the guys next to me, they know what that is, and that's basically where we shut down all of our specialty units and redirect that manpower to patrol function, so that we have 2-3 times as many people out there on the road at once. So, and we're ready to do that. The schedules have been made. Deputies know assignments and what they're going to be asked to do, and the expectations are pretty clear, so we're ready to move forward with that.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Sheriff. What about, so it's kind of a double-edged sword, this question. What we're experiencing nationally is not only the rioting and looting, but we have a glaring situation of police brutality in the case of what we saw in Minnesota. What are some of the action steps? And we will dive a little deeper into this for those of you that are watching at home, but just in general, what are some of the action steps that we're taking to protect ourselves against that here in training and educating our law enforcement officers?
So a lot of the folks tonight are going to hear that, I'm sure, from both these gentlemen as well. Yeah. Training, and is all we can really do. We like to do a lot of scenario-based training, and we've made it a requirement that all of our members on the detention side as well as the law enforcement side receive CIT training, which is crisis intervention training. And that's basically teaching our members how to de-escalate a situation so they don't go in there with just arrest on their mind. They go in there and with a plan to try to de-escalate the situation prior to that. Mm-hmm. So, and that's something that's happening around the nation, and there's very good training, and we're very fortunate that we've had the opportunity to participate in some of that.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Guys, man, what do y'all think? Anything to add at all or affirm?
I think in addition, obviously, to the training components that the sheriff has mentioned, the key component for us, and it's served us very well over the years, is appropriate hiring and selection. Let's face it, if we, through the hiring and selection process, can make sure that we're finding and hiring the right people for the right positions, they have the disposition we need, they have the skill set we need, it serves us very well to make sure that we don't end up with problem employees. If I never have a problem employee among my ranks, among my officers, I don't never have to deal with them. Similarly, from a training position, if we've selected the right people, we can ensure through training, through development, that they have the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities necessary to perform effectively as police officers, and that is critically important for us. Certainly in regard to responding to the potential rioting and looting, we are making organizational preparations, establishing operational plans, trying to make sure that we've stood up, so to speak, from a staffing perspective, and making sure that we have the resources necessary to try and address whatever concerns we may have. Now, certainly this is a collaborative effort for us. We are a very small organization. We've been in contact with the sheriff's office. We have a mutual aid agreement in place, and we're trying to ensure that we can supplement our staff and resources with what's available from their agency and any other organizations that might be able to provide support for us.
Yeah, excellent. So what it sounds like to me is you guys will be working together, obviously, as
Absolutely.
a community and interagency. What do you think, Fansler?
The only thing I would add is, besides the hiring, is identifying some of the, for lack of a better term, older staff that we have and some of the problems that they may develop over a career, because seeing some of the things that these guys see every single day, you tend to get a little bit hardened to certain things, and identifying those guys, and when you start seeing that all they see is the harder things of life without looking for the good in certain people, is getting those folks trained or identifying when we need to retract those individuals.
Sure.
So as far as training, I echo what these two gentlemen say. We train for every conceivable idea that we possibly can think of. And then our resources are obviously, we're going to be relying on the sheriff very heavily on this. I mean, we're the smallest agency in the county. I'd be ignorant to say that we are well prepared to take on rioters above 100 people. I mean, we would have
Which we're certainly not asking for.
Absolutely not. But that's another thing. We are part of our community. We live in our communities.
Yeah.
We shop in our communities. We love our communities. I think that is one thing that helps us tremendously. Is we, like Sheriff Blackman said, we know a good portion of the people in our communities. We see them every day. We're part of them. We go to church with them. We shop with them. It is a bond that we purposely create in our communities, I think, that helps us stand alone amongst many across our nation.
Excellent. Well, thank you all three for responding to that. And by the way, for those of y'all that are listening in at home, if you're just now tuning in, do us a favor, like and share. Put this conversation onto your page. Feel free to comment either on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're at. We have a team of people that are on the side just kind of monitoring those comments and interacting with you in that forum. I would suspect that you probably still have more specific questions about whether it be preparation for brutality or rioting, etc. Don't worry, I just wanted to open the can, start the conversation. We'll dive into more specifics about that here as the conversation goes on. So stay tuned and continue to be a part of this. But let me pass it on to our community of leaders, the council that has joined us this evening, and they're going to ask most of the questions from here on out, and I'll just kind of ask clarifying questions as we go.
Gentlemen, you echoed the word community, and that's such an important element of this conversation, so I applaud you for that. Would the local agencies be willing to assemble citizens' councils that would benefit the agencies with regards to meeting on a regular basis and addressing the underlying issues or conversations that are taking place throughout our community?
So I could start with that. Yes is the answer to that question. In 2017, when I took office, we started what we would call the Sheriff's Citizens Academy. And actually, people that are on this stage have attended that Citizens Academy, and that the goal within that was, after we had a couple of the academies, Citizens Academy to develop a citizens advisory board that we would invite those folks to sit on and offer counsel or offer advice or suggestions, or folks we could get to get our information out and do that. And then, as well as you know, you were there the other night with our Sheriff's Community Council. We were kind of thrust into that because of the ongoing events across the country, and that's exactly what I would like to see happen, some sort of council like that would maybe meet quarterly, twice a year or something of that nature, so that there was a good dialogue back and forth between the community and the Sheriff's Office.
I would absolutely echo that, yes. And being the close nature in which our organizations work, I think it would be a great opportunity to be a collaboration between the three organizations within the county. Though there may be different key members in Lake Placid and perhaps in Avon Park, certainly the nature of the communications, the nature of the dialogue, and the conversations that take place are very similar in nature, and it's going to invoke conversation and dialogue that simply has to occur. As opposed to being a redundant effort in all three jurisdictions, perhaps it could be collaborated between all three, and it could be a county-wide council that we could easily fulfill and address issues as they come up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very easily, any law enforcement leader who is against such does not deserve to be in his office. So absolutely, Lake Placid would be more than happy to meet. And like Chief Hoagland said, such a small county overall, yeah, it would be great to have this as one big collaborative partnership rather than trying to set up a whole bunch of different meetings.
That's good stuff, guys.
All right. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Again, I just want to say I appreciate you guys taking the time to come out and take part in this. It means a lot to myself, and I know it means a lot to the different people in the community. So, but getting into my question, what measures are your departments taking to ensure the use of force policies are strengthened to protect human life and citizens' constitutional rights? So again, what are we putting in place to make sure we don't have a George Floyd type of situation?
Absolutely, Sheriff. If you don't mind, I'll start. From a policy perspective, I think all of our organizations, I know specifically we conduct a policy review. On a regular basis, we will pull out the policy, assess it for validity, make sure that our legal references are correct, make sure that it's in line with current best practices. Though our agency is not accredited through the Florida Commission for Accreditation, our policies are written to be in compliance with it. So we generally operate from that basis and in line with best practices of other organizations. Beyond that, we also compare our policies and how we operate to other organizations within the area. Certainly, we look at the Sheriff's Office policy locally. We look at other municipalities that are of similar size to make sure that we're not trying to take on something that we can't facilitate or accomplish as an agency our size. We conduct a post-incident review anytime there is a use of force, and I know we'll touch on this down the road as far as how those incidents are reported and how they're documented. We review them at an administrative level, we review them at a supervisory level, and they're done not only for compliance with applicable law, but to ensure that they're compliant with our policy and to ensure that they're compliant with best practices as an officer. Make sure that we're looking at them in regard to how a reasonable officer would act. Let's face it, just because the law, just because a policy, just because a codified rule says we can do something might not necessarily mean that we should have done something. So we really want to put a common sense test in place, and we do so to make sure that we're not acting egregiously, that we didn't utilize too much force, and that we've done what we should have done throughout that process.
We're always going to be echoing each other because for the most part we all follow each other's policies and procedures very closely, but we too, thankfully we don't have too many use of force issues in Lake Placid, maybe at most one a year, so it isn't something that we deal with as often as larger agencies, but when we do, obviously we do have an after-action situation. One of the things I think that has helped us tremendously keep a high level of professionalism with our officers and getting similar respect back from our community is our use of body-worn cameras. This has allowed us to go back and review. If we get complaints, we can listen to or watch how an officer is dealing with the community and decipher if it is actually an issue with the officer or an issue with perception of the person that they're dealing with. It has actually significantly decreased our complaints. It has also helped me weed out some bad officers. So that in itself, I think, has been a great asset to our agency.
So from my standpoint, Coach, I know you thanked us for being here, but I'd like to thank you for being here as well. I know it's probably not easy for you guys to, and ladies, I apologize, to get away from your families during this time and leave them kind of at home by themselves and be here with us tonight. So we certainly do appreciate that as well. And thank you guys for asking us the tough questions. Certainly do respect that and appreciate that. From our standpoint, our use of force, particularly our use of force policies, those are generated as a result of acts like the 1983 Civil Rights Act, federal law, Graham versus Connor, those types of things. Those are where our policies are generated from, and specific wording within those policies, that's where that comes from. Just like Chief Hoagland said, even though they're not an accredited agency as of yet, we annually review ours because we are accredited. We're accredited through FCAC as well as CFA, and that is a standard or a mandate that we have to review every single policy we have, not just use of force, but every single policy, every single general order we have annually. And the reason that we have to do that is so that they stay up to date with legislative changes, that they're up to date with current law changes, and we have to do that, or we will lose our accreditation status. So we have to do that. Recently, as we discussed in the Sheriff's Community Council meeting the other day, we recently made a change to our use of force policy, which now mandates, where in the past it's always been an expectation if a deputy sees something that's not one of his fellow members is doing, and it's not kosher, it's excessive use of force, or it's illegal use of force, what we talked about the other day. Our expectation was that they would act on that. That has now been changed. Our use of force policy, it is now a mandate. If they see someone using excessive force or illegal force, they are to take action immediately to remove whoever the subject is, being the victim at that particular point, remove them from the scene and immediately contact a supervisor. We put that out Monday, and as soon as we put it out, starting that evening, Monday evening, we trained 2 squads. We trained 2 squads yesterday, and training has been going on all day today and will continue until every single member at the Sheriff's Office has received that training based on that policy change.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that, Sheriff Blackman. What's the name of that policy? I thought that was a great way to name it. And just for those that are listening at home, would you just in a truncated version explain again how that policy works?
So that particular policy, and we will get into this a little bit further.
Okay, well then let's wait.
Okay, you want me to wait?
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay.
That'll work. Thanks for telling me that, by the way. I don't want to probe when I'm not supposed to. So yeah, hang on. We're going to dive back into that one. That's a good one. Just the expectation on officers to intervene when they witness other officers or deputies using excessive or illegal force in a situation. We'll dive back into that one later on, sounds like.
Probably the next question.
Okay, well, who's up?
The next question.
Okay, sorry.
We certainly want to, again, just thank everyone for being here, especially our law enforcement leaders. We appreciate you and the work that you have been doing here in Highlands County, and we just thank you. Thank you for the panel. Thank you for Dustin Woods, Pastor Woods, and everyone in the community. I think it's very important for us to just, in this question, just a precursor to this question is that in training officers, most Florida Department of Law Enforcement says that we use of force as the last result. I mean, that's the last thing. We want to make sure that we de-escalate. We want to make sure that we don't touch, we don't want to do anything without making sure that we assess, and when we assess, and then now we use all the means that is necessary before we use force. So my question is, how is your department tracking the employees that use force? And what are the specifics in your policies designed to limit the use of force practices?
I'll go first because it's easiest for us because we have very, very few. So it's very easy for me to track the one potential use of force case that we may have throughout the year. But we consistently train throughout the year. Being several years of teaching at the South Florida State Community College in the defensive tactics, it is something that I find passionate about, and training our officers annually, including the de-escalation part of that, and how to handle people without hurting people. I think that's very important, is how to handle people without hurting people. I don't think that you need to necessarily injure somebody to secure them, regardless of, up into deadly force, obviously, used against an officer, then they have to escalate. But we continue to train on ways of being nice, but still doing the job, getting people safely to jail, getting our guys safely home at the end of the day. But as far as tracking, it's just something that we do on a case-by-case basis. We don't have anything that's super intricate, super cool. I don't have any special hidden programs for it.
I think part of my answer will certainly be covered by the sheriff as well, or it will cover it for him. We have a shared computer reporting system for law enforcement reporting throughout the county, and a part of that is a use of force incident report that is built into that reporting system, and our agency utilizes that report. That reporting system requires that the officer, upon using force, certainly articulate all of the officer and all of the subject factors that pertain to that specific interaction, that specific incident, and then what the subject does in response to the officer's requests, how the use of force was executed or carried out, and what the end result was. It's a very articulate component of the software, and it allows for a significant amount of detail and comprehensive coverage of that use of force. So from a tracking perspective, it covers the date, time, location, incident, who was involved, what officers might have been involved, and it ties it back to that offense or incident. Each and every use of force that the agency is involved in is documented in that manner. Once that report is completed by the officer, it's returned into the supervisor. The supervisor then submits it to an administrator. The administrator reviews it, and it is reviewed for appropriateness of force, whether or not everything was done as it should be, or whether corrective action perhaps might have been necessary. From a tracking perspective, if we find that we have an officer that's going hands-on too quickly, they're not utilizing de-escalation, they're not talking, they're not verbalizing, they're not utilizing presence, they're going straight to a force situation, obviously we're going to have that record through this reporting system, and opportunities for, I'll say, remediation would be simple. Whether it's a retraining issue, whether it is a coaching issue, whether it's a termination issue or a discipline issue. None of us, and I think I speak collectively for all of us, want an employee who's going to jump to force quickly, and certainly we don't want an employee that's going to utilize force unnecessarily, illegally, or inappropriately.
Yes, sir. Sheriff?
So just a few things I would add, absolutely what Chief Oglen says, but I want to read for you what the first line is on our use of force policy. And I'm going to read it off this page because I don't want to mess this up, but this is what every deputy sees when he looks at the use of force policy. And you heard both the gentlemen next to me. For consistency purposes, a lot of our policies look the same. We certainly don't want someone that works for Lake Placid PD to treat someone differently than from the sheriff's office or vice versa, and we want our stuff to be pretty consistent. So this is our policy, and this is what it reads for the first line that the deputy's going to see. It shall be the policy of the sheriff's office that all members acting within their official capacity use only the amount of force reasonably necessary to effect a lawful objective or confirm with federal and state law. Pretty simple. Absolutely as simple as it can be. You're not going to do anything that's not reasonable, and you're only going to use the force that you need to take someone into custody. I think it's pretty obvious, particularly for the incident in Minnesota, there was too much force used, obviously. It goes without saying. So that's what we want our deputies to see when they read that policy, and believe me, they do read that policy quite a bit. To make sure that they're within the scope of what they're supposed to be doing.
And you were going to tell us a little bit about a new policy that you're rolling out right now, and y'all are in the middle of training right now. Tell us a little bit about that real quick.
So as I talked about earlier, so the last part, that is what they read in the first part of that policy. And the very last part of that policy, I believe it's section 8, and I don't have it in front of me, it says that every deputy or every member will be cognizant of or react to any action that they seem or they deem illegal force. So for us in the sheriff's office, we used to say excessive force, but we found illegal force was a little easier to define, and that's what we went with. And it is now the deputy's absolute responsibility to report that and to do something about it immediately. They can't wait till the next day. They can't wait until they say, oh, well, someone must have filmed that. I'm seeing it on Facebook now.
Yeah.
And now say, no, it is their responsibility when they see it to take action right now.
That's great.
And
One question that came in online that's probably worth interjecting right here was, we're talking about what's expected of other officers or deputies if they observe excessive use of force. Just real quick, fire away. What about bystanders? What should we do if we observe it happening?
So I would strongly suggest do not get involved. That oftentimes can make the situation worse because the officers or the deputies that are there present, they don't know if they're there to help them or if they're there to hurt them.
Right.
So the best thing to do is stand back, control your emotions, and be a good witness. Yeah. We will need good witnesses at the end of the day when it's all over. Be there. Don't disappear when it's all over and said. Come forward and either contact the supervisor that's on scene, or if you don't feel safe by doing that, you think that there's something, there's some distrust there, when you leave the scene, call a supervisor who wasn't on the scene. Or if, in our case, call one of these guys, call another agency that's in that same area and report that so we can get that information.
Yeah, the group we met with the other night, you said, pull out your cell phone and video it. If you don't trust it to bring it to us, then bring it to one of the other agencies and let them scrutinize us, which I appreciated that.
So I want to,
yeah.
if I have time to go back to talk to what Dr. Shannon was talking about, Chief Hoagland covered it very, very well. But within we have a system called the AIM program, and it is a software that we utilize to help track instances of not just use of force, but several different things, and I'll walk you through those and how we track them. But now we do have 370 members at the sheriff's office, and each one of those members is within that software, within that program. And what we track is vehicle crashes, uses of force, taser deployments, sick use, sick leave use, reprimands, coaching and counseling, as well as awards and recommendations. And each time a report is generated under one of those situations, that report is just like the Chief Hoagland said, is forwarded to the supervisor. Supervisor reads it, approves it, disapproves it, whatever. It goes to the next level, all the way up the chain of the command, and then it's given to my internal affairs lieutenant, who enters it into the AIM program. Each one of those entries is documented by the system. If one of our deputies or one of our members gets 3 entries within 180 days, it sends up a red flag. The lieutenant then takes that, contacts the supervisor over that deputy and says, what's going on here? Could be saying, what's going on with all these, this guy's gotten 6 accommodations in the last, make sure we bring him in and see what he's doing so we can train our other deputies to do the same thing. Or if it's 3 uses of force, they'll investigate that. Were the uses of force, kosher? Were they up to what they were supposed to be, or what's going on here? But as long as they get 3 within 180 days, that red flag will go up. Or a combination of any of those, any 3 of those. Now, I know some of our viewers might be saying, well, 180 days, that's a long time. That's covering a pretty big spell. But really, for us who work 12-hour shifts, 180 days is really only 90 days. Because that's 90 working days that they would be out involved with the public and doing their work. So that's kind of what we have it set at. We can adjust that however we feel. We just thought that 180 days was fair.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Welcome, Coach Brooks.
Again, gentlemen, I'm going to echo the sentiments of the rest of the panel, and thank you all again for taking time out to be here and working with us through this very, very difficult process, and we do appreciate you. I got an opportunity yesterday to watch a Facebook video from a gentleman I grew up with, and he just this quote came to mind that he said, and I want to give him credit for it. He said, it's not a heart problem because it's a problem of the heart, And so with that in mind, what is the department doing to ensure the culture of your department is racially sensitive, to all ethnic values across all racial barriers to ensure all citizens are treated humanely, equitably, and fairly.
I guess it's my turn to go first again? Okay, so obviously the state requires us to do specific types of training, whether that's human diversity training, bias-based training. So we provide that for all our members. In fact, it's a mandatory requirement that we train our members in that type of stuff. So we obviously are doing that. From a standpoint, I think Chief Hoagland mentioned it earlier, my hiring practices will assure that. I need to make sure that the folks that I hire and retain at the Highlands County Sheriff's Office are a true mirror reflection of the community that we're serving. I need my organization to be diverse. I need them to be men, women, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, and that's what we need so that we understand when our community is having a problem or an issue with something, we have our own members to go to as well, for more than just the community here, but our community that are on the front lines with us and say, why are they thinking this, or why are they doing this, or can you get us some information? So that's kind of what we have to do, we need to do. To make sure that that stays consistent, each year my lieutenant over internal affairs provides me with a bias-based report for the entire year, which tells us, are we getting a lot of complaints from our minority community on our deputies? Are we issuing traffic citations more to blacks than we are Hispanics, than we are to whites? And that report is generated for me every year, and I get to sit down and look at it and make sure that we're doing things right from that standpoint. I also have to make sure that I'm sending a message from the top down, and that I'm leading the right example. I give a perfect example of that. It was the early part of last year, or I'm sorry, the early part of this year, late last year. I had one of my deputies who, while off duty, made a racial slur towards another member of the sheriff's office at a get-together, and it outraged his zone or his fellow deputies, and his supervisor heard it. Immediately wrote me a memo saying that he was requesting an IA. An IA was completed, and
An IA means?
internal affair investigation.
Attaboy.
Sorry about
There
that
we
for
go.
sorry about that.
For the rest of us that
Yes.
weren't
So
sure.
an investigation
Yeah.
was done, and it was founded. So we immediately brought that person into the sheriff's office, and I sat him down and terminated him. And from that example, I think the rest of our staff realized, hey, that's not going to be tolerated around here, and we're not going to have that. So I think giving those examples from the top down and not changing the culture, because I don't think the culture at the sheriff's office has ever been racist or anything of that nature, but just confirming that we're going to treat everyone the same, with the same respect, and we're going to be there to serve every single person, no matter their age, their color, their gender, no matter what. We're treating everyone equal.
And real quick, Sheriff, something you mentioned to us in our first meeting that resonated with me that I really felt the panel needs to hear and know about. And you said that with your deputies, you were very, very clear with them that you will not promote them based on the number of people they arrest, but on the number of people they help. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, and I appreciate you actually saying that too.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you, Sheriff. Anything to add that would be any different from the other agencies?
I think I'm going to have to cover my paper because the sheriff's obviously copying. I can't overstate the importance of the hiring and selection component, and especially at a time where my organization is short personnel. Many years ago, prior to my tenure as chief, our organization made a commitment to not hiring bodies just to fill positions. We make sure that the people we bring in the organization are worth having, that they are of good organizational fit, that they match the goals and the objectives, and they are the right people for the jobs. And we've maintained that philosophy moving forward under my tenure. And it's proved tenfold to be a valuable commitment to quality, not quantity. The second side of that is, again, as a very small organization, we have an opportunity to do what I call modeled accountability. I see my staff on an almost daily basis. My watch commander, who's my sergeant, the shift supervisor, We have a daily briefing. They have an opportunity to sit with the lieutenants. They have an opportunity to sit with the assistant chief. So we have great ability to have some of those hard conversations, some of that direct dialogue and discussion about how cases were handled, how interactions have gone, and we can reinforce positive behavior face to face. So there is a commitment to enforcing and upholding what we expect to be done the right way, so it's repeated. Similarly, when somebody handles something perhaps inappropriately or it didn't go quite the way we thought it was, we have an opportunity immediately and in very close quarters, so to speak, to address it, to attempt to coach, counsel, or discipline and remediate those folks through that so that we can display the leadership traits, the characteristics, and the behavior that we want our people to display.
I would just quickly say that it is our responsibility as law enforcement leaders to set the model for our officers. Just like Sheriff Blackman said, it is up to us to set what we will tolerate and what we will not tolerate. And our officers recognize that, and then they go out and they go forth in our community. So I take it upon myself to meet with each one of our officers, especially during the hiring process, and be very frank with them about what I will and will not tolerate, including how they will treat people, their truthfulness, and so on and so forth. And I've spoken many times. I'm probably one of the most outspoken as far as on social media, whether that's good or bad. And I have said many times, I don't care what color you are, what sexual orientation you are, what political affiliation you are, we're going to treat everybody exactly the same. And that is with respect. We have a job to do, and that is protect, serve, not judge. We're not judges. We're there to help. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but I grew up very differently than these other two gentlemen, and I'll touch base on the end of this. I think a lot of folks already know how I kind of lived a little further on the edge when I was younger, but I think it made me better at what I do now because it made me recognize then how law enforcement can treat folks and how they should treat folks. I wanted to model myself, if I ever became a law enforcement officer, on how people should be treated.
And I think our community at large would affirm that. You guys model that well in your lives. We appreciate that, but we appreciate you not being comfortable with where we're at, but wanting to continue to drive us forward to improve that culture. Welcome, Edie Grice.
So I have worked with the children and the youth in our community for many years. And when I think about the things that they are seeing on TV, the things that they're reading on social media right now, and the fear that causes, I wonder how we as a community can build a bridge between our youth, our children, between law enforcement and our kids so that they know that they are valued, that they're safe, and that there is a hope and a future for them. I think about how the things that they see and hear today go with them so far into their lives.
We should have a coin and just toss it, see who wins. We're obviously at a different place than probably some of the busier agencies, so we have an opportunity to kind of slow down in Lake Placid. It's a little bit slower pace there. So our officers previously have had opportunities to go into the schools and meet, especially during lunchtime when everybody's gathered up in the common area, to sit around and be candid with a lot of the students from the elementary all the way up to the high school, because we see how things can escalate and how the tempo will change, especially at a time like now. If school is in, things would probably be a different conversation than other times. So we also are around after school, myself included, have taken time to meet. We have a park that's very close to our schools, and kids will gather there and toss the ball. Taking those opportunities to see a uniform out there and tossing a ball with them, and taking the time to let them see that we're not just out there looking to write tickets, take people to jail, and do all the things that people think that cops do. We try in Lake Placid to go just one step further and let not just people who we think are important know that we care about them, but even the young, because we at least I have seen a lot of these folks that I'm dealing with as parents. They were kids when I first started, and I realized how I was treating them then helps me deal with them now. So I think it's very important to really thrust ourselves in there when we have those opportunities and just be very candid. Let them ask those questions, regardless of what they are, and just let them see that we're not these uniforms. We're men. We were boys at one time. We were doing the same things that they were doing, and let them realize that it's okay. But let us lead you in a better way.
So I absolutely would agree with that, and I think we have put in place at the Highlands County Sheriff's Office a lot of different programs to help us in that direction, because I do think it's so very important. We unfortunately, I'm sure it's not just a problem in Highlands County, but all over the state and all over the nation, we have a lot of families that are split up and broken, and there's not a role model in the family, so to speak, and so where does that child get that information, or where does that child learn what the right thing is to do? Which was one of the big reasons that a few years back, or last year actually, when the governor decided we either need to have deputies in every single school or we needed to have guardians. I wanted a uniform, and Dr. Longshore and I had long conversations about this. We were both in support of it, that we wanted a uniform in every single school. And it didn't matter if it was my uniform, Chief Hogan's uniform, or Chief Fansler's uniforms, but we wanted them in every single school so that we could start building those relationships, not starting at the middle school level. We wanted to start it at the elementary level so that there is some sort of consistency all the way through grade school, all the way up through high school, and now we even have one at the college. So we're definitely excited about that, and we're certainly all for that program. At the Sheriff's Office, for example, we take 6 or 7 of our deputies every year with 72 children. 72 children that have probably never been to a camp in their life, and we take them up to the Florida Sheriff's Youth Ranch for a week. So there's some definitely bonding and some bridge building is used to spend time with children and influence them in their lives. And I certainly encourage all of our members to either be a mentor through the school program with Dr. Longshore, or Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Boys and Girls Club, even over at Bountiful Blessings Church with the Teen Center, encouraging our deputies to stop by there and invest some of their time in some of these kids that we have in our neighborhoods and stuff, because we just have no idea on what the return on that investment is going to be. It can only be positive, I promise.
Just a few closing thoughts, and I think both these gentlemen have touched on some very key and important points. But I think one thing that's important for us is we have to continue to find ways to create ways to engage in meaningful, positive relationships with our kids. It isn't like it was when we grew up, where kids were outside all the time, and where there was an opportunity where you could stop by and meet a bunch of kids at the park, or they were kicking the ball around or throwing the ball. In the world we live in now, there are opportunities that we have to create whereby we have organized clubs, the teen center, as the sheriff mentioned. The investments that our school resource officers and school resource deputies make are invaluable. Some of the youth organizations, some of the youth clubs, some of the educational clubs, we need to find ways to involve more folks, more mentors, more leaders, and certainly more officers in some of those opportunities so that they can create long-lasting positive relationships with them.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, you threw out some examples, Sheriff Blackman, and as well as you did, Chief Fansler. I mean, those are some good examples of of some specific places, man. And as a community member, I want to encourage you guys to continue to encourage your team members to, man, find a place to mentor a kid. There's something about when one of your guys or gals steps into the life of a kid that really has a powerful impact, and we appreciate you continuing to encourage them. Let me just give you guys a quick time check, take just a short pause. For those of you that are watching in online and listening to this conversation, we would definitely appreciate if you just like this post, start joining the comment thread if you like, but definitely share it. Put it on your page so your friends and followers can also join in and see, like, let's be honest, not a whole lot of communities around the country are having conversations like this tonight. This is part of the blessing of being here in the Heartland. And I know there's many areas that we need to improve, but this is a huge step in the right direction. And so our hopes is that this really sets a tone for other communities to start sitting down and having conversations together. As for the sake of time, it's about 6:18, 6:20. So we're about 45 to 50 minutes into the conversation, and we've got about 4 questions left. So our aim is going to be to answer those within the next 30 to 40 minutes, just for those of you listening in, and I'll try to keep the conversation going, but I'd say we're making pretty good ground so far. So let me pass this conversation back to Coach Scott.
Well, I definitely want to echo just the last question when you're talking about with the youth. And, you know, the kids, when I was talking to Pastor Woods, you know, I think that's when we can be most effective. You know, I think when you have to deal with the 25 to 30-year-old adult, it may be difficult. But
So
if
what
you
I
can,
hear, Coach Scott is recruiting football coaches right now. Huh? We're trying to win a state championship.
we
this season.
would always take some guys out there to encourage the kids, no doubt. But I think, you know, if we can make that impact early and build that relationship early, it goes a whole lot further than when we're trying to do that when they're 16 and 17. And right now we have the
Cops Adapt.
And I think that's a great program, and definitely hope to continue to possibly get an opportunity to work with it.
So this is breaking news.
Okay.
I mentioned it in the meeting the other day that we had applied for 2 more positions in the Cops Adapt unit because we wanted 2 full-time positions in Lake Placid, Sebring, and in Avon Park. We got news last night, late last night actually, that the government approved our grant. So we're looking for 2 more folks for our Cops Adapt unit. We're very excited about that.
Since you brought that up, and it is related to Edie's question, give us the 30-second version of what in the world is Cops Adapt.
So Cops Adapt is a unit that we created when I first came into office. We recognized that there was a trust issue in what we call our partnership communities. Now, our partnership communities are generally minority communities within Lake Placid, Sebring, and in Avon Park, and we recognized that our crime rates in those areas were really skyrocketing, violent crimes. And then we would respond to crimes in those areas and we would get no information. We would get no help in solving a crime, and it was really frustrating for us. So we created this unit. We actually handpicked individuals that grew up in those particular neighborhoods and hired them on, trained them, and turn them back loose in those particular neighborhoods so that they could build those trust-based relationships. And I have 2 individuals, I brag on them every time I can. Benji Tony and Tevin Tony, who played football for Coach Scott over there. I promise you, by the time those guys are done with this community, if they're not filling my shoes, there'll be streets named after them, there'll be parks named after them. Just 2 unbelievable individuals who really, truly care about their community.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, that's what the Cops Adapt unit
All right, shout out to Tevin and Benji. We love those guys. Coach Scott.
Yes, sir. Well, now I have a question that it may get a little difficult because I think I'm kind of getting into the whole I guess trust factor and the belief of, you know, what a fellow officer believes is being standing true to each other. So in this question, it says, what is your department doing to eradicate institutional barriers? And I put brotherhoods because I know within the system or within each entity there's a brotherhood that they all have and a loyalty that they carry with each other. But it says, what are we doing to eradicate institutional barriers that would impede effective investigations concerning allegations of misconduct by officers? So again, I know sometimes it may be hard, or what some people, even the kids use the word snitching. But, you know, just dive in that if you could.
So, very, very good question. And I bet half of the phone calls that I get, whether it be a complaint on a deputy or just asking a question, it generally starts out with, I don't know why I'm calling and telling you this. I know nothing's going to be done. And okay, so you've started out this conversation with you think there's nothing going to be done. So that lets me know that there's a trust issue there. You don't trust me to look into it. So with that said, we created we didn't create it, our internal affairs investigation unit. They don't answer to anybody but me. That complaint is not going to go to a sergeant and kind of get pushed underneath the rug. It's not going to go to a different lieutenant on patrol who says, you know, oh, man, I can't have this, you know, complaint on this deputy. I really like this deputy, and, you know, I'm just going to kind of hide it. I'll just talk to him and not do anything about it. The IA lieutenant answers directly to me. I approve and disapprove any IA investigations. So if they come to me, how they have to come to me is via a memo. Any memo that we create at the sheriff's office is public record, and I will write on there either I approve that memo or I do not approve that to go to internal affairs. I write a memo to the internal affairs unit, and then they conduct the investigation. After the investigation is done, now it could go to the captain or the major for their approval to see if there's additional facts that need to be found. And they can send it back to IA for those additional facts and questions, and then they give it to me with a recommendation. And then I either go with that recommendation, I either go up or I go down, or I stay the same, and then that's how we carry on. But since we've been doing it that way, we've really found that the trust issue has kind of gone away. And then plus, you can look at our statistical data. Over the last 3 years, I've had 31 different internal affair investigations. Of those 31, 21 of them were founded. 21 founded complaints. 8 of them were unfounded. Now the math doesn't add up there, but I have 2 that are pending, and I can't comment on them because they are an active investigation, and I can't give out any information, and I don't know what the outcome of those will be.
So just to clarify, 21 out of 30, how many?
Out of 31.
21 out of 31, you actually found credibility in the complaint
Absolutely.
on the officer, and you guys took action of various sorts.
Absolutely.
Cool.
9 of those members were terminated. Several of them have received either suspended days off, some sort of reprimand, and 3 of them we arrested. That's embarrassing to sit up here in front of you and say that we arrested 3 of our members, but sometimes that's what has to be done, and you know, it's not something that we're proud about, but they did something that was wrong, and they were held accountable for their actions.
Well, I can assure you the community that's listening in right now is applauding you guys for doing the hard stuff of leadership. You know, that's why you were put in those roles, and we do appreciate that, even when there's a cost for you, you know, to make the hard decisions. So thank you, guys. Anything to add to that, Chief Hoagland?
Very briefly, the system we have in place at the Sebring Police Department is very similar, that our internal affairs investigator is the assistant chief, so he reports directly to me and me only. In the odd event that he would be involved somehow, that he was part of the case, part of the investigation, part of the action, it would be deferred to one of the division commanders who then would refer or report directly to me. To overcome the barriers potentially that may exist for the community or someone wishing to file a complaint, our members are directed that any member of our organization can be the recipient of a complaint. A citizen doesn't have to come in and talk just to the chief, doesn't have to come in and just talk to the Internal Affairs Office. Any officer, any member of the agency can refer that complaint for review, and we accept all of them. Now, we will screen them based upon the nature of the complaint, what the allegations might be, the severity of the complaint, but we look at each and every one of them. We really work diligently to make sure there's no appearance of it being inappropriate, that it's going to get swept under the rug, or that it's not going to be given any credibility. I would propose that the men and women of Sebring Police Department, and I'm certain the Sheriff's Office and Lake Placid PD, good officers, good deputies do not like bad cops. And I would propose that though there may be a strong brotherhood or sisterhood or camaraderie, they're not going to stand for the actions of an officer that's going to jeopardize their badge, that's going to tarnish their reputation, or put them in poor light.
That brotherhood goes both ways, too. You've got some that will protect each other, then you've got some that won't put up with that nonsense. And that goes throughout the departments or agencies as well, because I've had to terminate an officer for kind of going above and beyond, being a little aggressive and reflecting a character I didn't want to have in my agency. That complaint actually came from a deputy who came to me and had some conversation with me, and then we started reviewing videos, because this too is a great tool to help us eliminate those kind of trust issues, because it's an independent witness. It's not going to lie as long as it's been utilized properly. So that, like I said, that brotherhood goes both ways. We have an agency that will defend itself from outside forces if necessary, but it will not tolerate the injustice from inside out either. So we're going to tattle on ourselves or on each other if necessary. We're not going to stand there and let our reputations be tarnished because somebody made a bad choice. we're not going to defend that person. We have families to feed. We have a career. I still have a little ways to go before I can even think about retiring. So we take it very, very seriously. I'm not going to allow somebody else's bad actions, bad decisions affect my career, my future, or the future of my officers. Because small agencies, we're all hinging on potentially one bad decision, and your agency could just be pulled. So that also gives an extra drive to go above and beyond, to be more professional, and be more courteous, and do the right thing. I'm going to start rambling, so I'm just going to shut up here.
Well, I just wanted to ask, are the complaints, are they public record also?
A complaint on a deputy, I'm assuming these guys are the same way. A complaint on a deputy, once it is made and an investigation is open, it is not public record until that investigation is completed. Once it is completed, it becomes public record, and we have to hold on to it, depending upon the type of complaint, whatever the record's retention period of time is for that. Usually 5 years, it could go up to 15, forever, so.
And just to touch real quickly, if discipline is the result, or if the officer is exonerated, meaning they're cleared of any wrongdoing, generally a letter gets placed in their personnel file, which has to remain on file for, I think, 50 years after they've left the agency. So there's a permanent record of the end result of that complaint, whether it's discipline, whether they're cleared, whether they are exonerated, or whatever the case might be.
So so at least there's a paper trail that this may be a reoccurring issue with the guy, even though he may have escaped it once.
Absolutely.
And that's good to know.
And we don't want to be sending bad officers to other agencies either.
Absolutely,
so we're
yeah.
going to make sure if we identify one, we don't want them working anywhere in the criminal justice system. So we want to eradicate them as quickly as possible. Like Chief Hoagland said, there's nothing we dislike more than bad cops.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Dr. Shannon.
Certainly want to thank you for the candidness and transparency on a difficult question to law enforcement agencies. However, proof of behavior is not what we say, but what we do. Image shape reality. And with that, in social media, all we see is the image. And with that, the question is a follow-up question with Coach Scott is saying, what is the department doing to remove or reassign officers that repeatedly display uncontrolled behavior towards citizens, to non-citizens contact assignments? And I think that non-citizen contact assignments is basically commensurate to the level of the offense that they violated, or do you have that?
So we have I guess it would be an unwritten rule at the Highlands County Sheriff's Office. We don't like to move a problem. If a person is, let's say a deputy is assigned to road patrol and he's having a problem, or she is having a problem communicating or making bad decisions, that needs to be handled there. It would start at coaching and counseling from the supervisor, frontline supervisor. If that doesn't work, reprimand. Actually, it's going to be coaching and counseling with a very clear definition of what our expectations are, what we're expecting from that person, how we're expecting them to treat people, after they've already gotten that when I hired them, by the way. But then if they can't make that adjustment, then a reprimand. And then once a person has received a reprimand or any type of disciplinary action, they can't move. They cannot transfer to another part of the organization. They can't even put in for a promotion until they've had a clean record for 1 year. And that is all, and that falls off of their record. So we're not going to move a problem. We are in the service industry. Every single person that's at the Highlands County Sheriff's Office is dealing with someone else, and I just don't believe it's right to move a problem from one side of the organization to the other.
I think I'll echo those thoughts very quickly, and I actually made a note toward this question, and that is all of our organizations likely have a progressive disciplinary policy, meaning if there's a minor violation that's committed and within a certain time frame that same type violation occurs, the employee has not been remediated, the potential discipline will increase. If somebody makes an honest mistake and there was no ill intent, it's forgivable to the extent that the impact or the gravity of the violation isn't so significant we can't overcome it. From the perspective of moving that employee, I would absolutely relocate them, but they're going to be relocated outside of the organization. I, much like the sheriff, am not going to retain a problem. We're going to follow our disciplinary policy. We're going to work within the confines of our union contract, but we're going to make sure that that problem is not ours any longer to the best of our abilities.
Quite simply, in a small agency like Lake Placid, the only place to move them is out.
Yeah.
They can go mow grass or do something else. Law enforcement isn't for everybody, and we quickly identify that, and they can hit the bricks. I mean,
Thank
we're
you,
not going to
guys.
tolerate it.
Yeah, and I tell you what, just this wasn't a part of our scripted conversation tonight, but let's talk about it from the opposite angle briefly. What about officers coming in from other agencies? How do we make sure that we're not getting bad apples?
So that, exactly that. We do investigations. We have background investigator that will go out, spend time with folks where they're coming from, interview people at their agencies, look at their personnel files, and make sure that we are getting quality applicants. Like the Chief said, like Chief Hoagland said earlier, those are hard to come by because people want to retain their good officers. You don't have a lot of good officers leaving and going other places. You do sometimes because families, I mean, we just hired an individual from Indiana who moved down here to take care of his mom and dad. And a great officer up there. We couldn't find anything in his personnel file that would lead us to believe anything else. And you know, sometimes that's tough, but that's what you got to do. If you have to send somebody to Indiana to interview neighbors and look at you know, former zone partners and stuff, that's just what you have to do. But
So you're telling us that as our local sheriff's department, you actually have one of your deputies whose job is to travel around, interview families, do the research on incoming.
His actual job is to do all background investigations, which would include that, and he's our polygrapher. And he does all of so each person coming into our organization to be hired has to pass a polygraph.
Okay.
And he's the one that does that.
Okay, great.
Even as small as we are in Sebring, we have an employee whose responsibility is to conduct background investigations, and it extends beyond what the sheriff mentioned alone with pre-employment. We talk to employers, we talk to your landlords. If you've gone to school, we'll try to get your academic records. We want to do a comprehensive analysis to make sure that the person we're welcoming into our family is, one, worthy of being there, and two, going to facilitate and accomplish the goals and objectives in a manner that we would like them to do.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Eddie, go ahead.
All right, I just want to echo what my peers was mentioned earlier about our young people in our community. I think this is a perfect opportunity for us to lead by example for our young people that are watching us when we're not looking. They're watching us. They're wanting to see how we're handling situations such as the challenges that we're presently facing. But let's shift this conversation around. Just a question real quick is, how do we as a community, how do we support and champion your message that what we're doing collectively as that word community stands out in this evening's setting? How do we help as a community to champion that?
My turn?
We're racing. Go ahead.
It's events like this. It's exactly this, where we're all sitting together, we're having conversation about everything. Nothing is left off the time. I mean, there's nothing that we can't sit here and discuss. There's no questions that you can't ask. But we should be doing this all the time. It shouldn't be just after a tragedy has happened somewhere across the nation and everything is hit the fan. We should be doing this periodically. Let's have these community candid conversations or if something comes to mind, you can pick up the phone and call one of us. I know I'm very easy to get a hold of. I mean, if you can't get a hold of me, something bad has happened. You better send somebody out to search for me. So more of this getting into the community or the community coming to us and saying, hey, let's have some conversation. As you can clearly see, none of us are shy to sit and answer any question that you have. Some of them, I may not be smart enough I may have to ask you to dumb it down for me because I'm just a police officer, but this is it. This is it. The community being with the police and the police with the community.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Fansler.
I echo the thoughts and sentiments that Chief Fansler has shared. Continue doing what we've been doing to the extent we've been doing it correctly. When we look at some of the adversity we've overcome with Hurricane Irma, with the unfortunate death at the sheriff's office of one of our local heroes, when we look at getting through this pandemic, when we look at the victims of the SunTrust tragedy, our community has galvanized time and time again. And that is incredibly important for us to recognize and to celebrate. This is what we've been doing right. As we look towards tomorrow and figure out what else to do, let's work to continue to develop these types of relationships so that we can establish how we're going to have these difficult conversations in a venue that's appropriate, in a manner that's correct, and in a manner that's going to be productive, so that we can work on solving the difficult issues even when the solutions aren't going to be easy.
I would echo that exactly. I think it was Chief Fansler that said it earlier. We're just men. None of us are perfect. We walk around in bulletproof vests all day with uniforms on, and we try to keep our opinions as best we can to ourselves. And but we need our community's help. We need for you guys to gather up and come to us and sit with us and ask us questions, or ask us, do you need help with anything? From my standpoint, I think what we could use most is for you men to pray for us, to pray for our deputies, to pray for our members at the sheriff's office, because even though our country is going through a hard time right now, our country and our state, a lot of our members within our organization, they struggle every day. They have the same problems that everybody else has. When we're going through the COVID-19 issue, we have guys and girls that work that their husbands and wives lost jobs. And now all of a sudden they went from a 2-income family to a 1-income family, and the ones that work from it, they weren't allowed to take off. You can't take off. You're an essential. You have to come to work every single day. And yes, you might have you have a loved one, or you have kids at home that were, no longer can go to school because of the situation that it was, and they need your prayers. They need your help. So don't don't think that because someone wears a uniform that they're not human and they don't need your help. They do.
Thank you.
So just reach out.
And I just want to piggyback on what you said about this is what we need to have. I definitely agree. And Sebring is my community. Don't get me wrong, but then the Washington Heights community is where I was, ran the streets and did my bad, did my good. And that's the community that I want to speak for tonight, and hoping that we can also have these forums within the African American communities also, so that we can build, or you guys can build that relationship and continue to work on the trust factor, and just, again, increase the awareness and increase the fact that you guys are open to the whole community, but without a doubt, the African American community. So I think those are things that hopefully we can get going within Lake Placid and within Sebring and within Avon Park in the African American communities too.
Thank you guys, and thank you for that, Coach Scott. And I'm sure these guys will be happy to participate in that as well. Don't mean to speak on your behalf, but I know you're intending to make every effort to serve our community, and tonight is evidence of that for sure. I do have one more specific question, more of a personal nature, that I'm going to ask you in a couple minutes. And just for those of you listening in, that question is, we want to hear from the men behind the badge, the human side of them, how they feel about what they're experiencing personally in their families and what's going on in our community and country. But before I get to that, there's a couple of questions that have rolled in online that kind of go along with what we're talking about here. So I wanted to drop those into our conversation while we have a few extra minutes at 6:45. And just to remind those of you, again, that are watching and commenting, we appreciate all of the questions and all the comments that are coming in. And just know if we don't get to yours, or if this discussion tonight didn't cover your specific one, again, you can contact any of these agencies personally via email or phone call, or make an appointment. And I'm sure one of these guys or one of their executive leadership team will be happy to sit down and talk about your specific question or concern along the way, because they're all important. Some of the questions that have been coming in, I've been hearing this from the community as well, though, is how should we handle, and how are you handling some of the riot rumors that are coming down the pipe? Obviously, we're all kind of reactive to that. They hit social media before they hit your desk, but how are y'all responding to that? How should we respond to that?
So we saw that very early on after the incident in Minneapolis, and we recognized we need to put together some sort of unit, some sort of group of people that can trace down the social media stuff and either found it and say, okay, this is true, this could happen, or unfound it, because what it creates is fear and intimidation within our community, because one person shares it and it spreads like wildfire. So we did create a particular intelligence gathering unit with a sergeant, a criminal analyst, a couple of members from the community, a GIS mapper, and what they do is basically scan social media platforms all day long and try to get these off and then see, is this a credible threat or is it not a credible threat? We have expressed to our community that if we find one that is credible, we will let you know that as quickly as we possibly can and make sure that that gets out as soon as we can possibly get that information out. So that's kind of what we're doing. At the meeting the other night, I mentioned, folks' First Amendment rights. It's my job as the sheriff to protect those constitutional rights, and I'm going to do that. And if anyone wants to have a rally or a protest, as long as that's done peacefully, we will help you do that.
Yeah,
we'll come out there with you and encourage you. Mm-hmm. But if you don't want to do that, as we saw in Lake Placid tonight, those are left to the weather gods, so to speak. And lightning popping and storms. Sometimes you don't have that opportunity. So I left it up to the council the other night that if they wanted to come into our sheriff's office, just like we did this morning, and film a commercial or film their protests, our PIO at the sheriff's office will assist them in that. He'll edit it for them. He'll try to create it for them, and we will put that out in contact and put it out for all of our social media platform, which could reach up to 40,000 people.
That's quite a generous and radical offer there.
Yep.
Sheriff.
And as long as the message is not about hate and is not about committing some sorts of crime, we will let you come in and get your message out.
That's great. Well, thank you for that opportunity, for sure. Along those lines, you said if you find a threat that is founded, that there is an imminent threat, there may be concern that it may happen, you said we'll communicate that out. In what ways will you communicate that out, specifically to people that don't have access to social media?
So, well, there's a couple of different ways, although we're going to contact the most people with our social media platform, whether it be our Facebook page, our Sheriff's Office app, which I encourage anybody to download. It's a free download, and we put out push notifications. Scott Dressel at Sheriff's Office does an amazing job and tries to get that information out. We also have Reverse 911, where we have messages. Probably some of the folks that are watching us today have received messages from me about runaways. In fact, I get calls all the time. Would you please quit calling me at 2 o'clock in the morning? And so that would be a system that we would utilize to get that out to as many people as possible, especially if we found out it was happening in a particular area, such as Avon Park. We wouldn't necessarily bother the folks in Lake Placid, but vice versa. If it was happening in Lake Placid, we would try to reach that demographic as quickly as we could.
Yeah, thank you. Chief Fansler made a comment earlier about having access to body cams in Lake Placid. Something that we've discussed previously is what that would look like to put into play on the large scale for our entire sheriff's department. Give us the brief synopsis of where that's at in process. Is that a possibility? What's it going to cost? And is it bringing the benefit? Do you feel that it would be beneficial? Tell us about body cams for y'all.
I absolutely believe it would be beneficial, just for the reasons that Chief Fansler mentioned earlier. We saw it when we put cameras in all of our patrol cars. Our complaints on officers went down. It actually helps build great evidence for cases, so we would love to see it. Our deputies are for it. It's just a financial issue.
Yeah, what would that cost the county for us to be able to properly outfit our deputies with body cams?
Somewhere between $1.5 and $2.5 million. I have 180 sworn deputies on the law enforcement side. I have about 100 on the detention side. So we're looking at somewhere in the millions of dollars to make that happen. We are aggressively seeking grants because there are some grants out there to help fund that. So we are, just like I told you, we had received the grant from the Department of Justice for the Cops Adapt Unit. We are aggressively looking for grants to fund that project as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate that response. Now, the reason why it's such a big number, from what I understand, is not just the body cam itself, but we're talking about enough data memory storage to be able to house that much information.
That is absolutely
per shift,
Yep,
per day.
The camera and the technology itself is not that expensive. It is the servers and the technology, the editing technology, where is most of your money is at in those areas. And obviously there is some there's some maintenance requirement to some of those, and
Yeah.
updates and stuff like that that can get, in the long term, can get quite expensive.
Anything any different for Sebring PD related to body cams?
No, we have deployed mobile video recorders in our cars. We've had them for years, back when we used to use VHS tapes to support the recordings, or since digital. We are unfortunately taking a watch and wait perspective due to the costs associated with it and the technology learning curve. All of the video potentially, if there isn't a privacy right expectation, is subject to release under public record, and there's a considerable side of redaction depending upon who your vendor is for those. And it's just not a challenge at this point that we are able to take financially, and we've got to be sure that we've got the resources and infrastructure in place before we can consider moving forward with it.
If the community wanted to help with these financial challenges, how could they? Somebody probably sitting on 1.5 mil tonight. Sheriff Blackman, where do they give that money?
Well, surprisingly enough, we have a lot of people that donate to our canine program.
Okay.
People love dogs.
Yeah.
And in fact, the last
So if you love body cams,
yeah, the last dog we purchased was brought about totally with donations. So if you want to bring some money down to the sheriff's office and put on the check for body cams, we will put it in the right account.
there you go. There you go. Thank you.
But could I might get in trouble with this, but since the question was, what can the community do to help you and assist you? And I know we don't like taxes, but I don't know about you, but I woke up one night at about 1 o'clock and a man was at the bottom of my bed. And if it wasn't for my training and to take him down and then call 911, and 4 of your police cars or officers was there to help subdue the guy, I'm saying I wouldn't mind paying 1 or 2 cents taxes so that now your staff and your officers can have everything that they need in order to make sure I'm safe. And I'm saying that in the, right here to tell all community people, we need to be willing to sacrifice so that now our law enforcement officers can have everything they need to satisfy what they need to do in terms of the safety of this community.
And while money is not always the answer, that would be a way to bring a greater accountability to the boots on the ground for those tough interactions that it's a judgment call. So that's a good point. Sounds like you have an advocate at the next budget meeting at the BOCC, Paul.
I was making note of that.
My man. Coach Scott's recruiting football players. You might as well recruit lobbyists, you know. So here's a good question that has come in. I'll just hit two more brief ones that come in online, and then we'll get to the heart of the matter. Several of the folks have commented throughout the night that they had some concerns, about not being able to get involved in a situation where they see an officer or deputy using excessive use of force. You guys' recommendation was stand back, be a witness, shoot a video, take a picture. Reiterate why you said that's so important and why it would not be best for a citizen to get involved in a situation like that. That's aimed at whoever, by the way.
Well, I think I had mentioned earlier that in the situation like that, when you have two, let's say in this particular case, you have 2 individuals, one being a deputy sheriff or a police officer, having to go hands-on with another individual, whether they're taking them into custody or whatever, all his or her focus is right there on what's going on. They're trying not to get hurt. They're trying not to hurt somebody, but trying to take control of the situation. They don't know if someone's coming up onto them to hurt them or to help them. And sometimes when when everybody's emotions are at the peak level, sometimes decisions aren't made to the best. So I would encourage anyone to just stay back. Don't even say, what we see a lot is people start yelling at each other, and people not even involved in the case yelling at each other, or yelling at the deputy to do something, or yelling at the guy to put your hands behind his back like he told you to do, or whatever. Just don't get involved. That's just another voice in the crowd, in the mix of trying to get a situation that's out of control under control.
Right.
And it's not, even though I'm sure there's instances out there where a law enforcement officer has been helped in those particular situations. Having the totality of all the issues, it's best just to stay out of the way and just record or just be a good witness.
Thank you, Sheriff. One more directed specifically at you, and then I have one more online question for the three of you. Let me just aim at you one more time. Here we are sitting on stage. We have the Sheriff of Highlands County, Chief of Police Lake Placid, Chief of Police Sebring. What about Chief of Police Avon Park? Who takes care of the people in Avon Park?
So a few years ago, they contracted with the Highlands County Sheriff's Office. I believe it was in 2015 or 16. They contracted the law enforcement services out to the Highlands County Sheriff's Office, and we provide law enforcement services for them and have done so since.
Great. Thank you for that. Now, this is aimed at all three of you. Last online question. Great question. A lot of the accountability stuff we've talked about tonight when it comes to holding officers accountable for their actions, when it comes to internal investigations, sounds like for the most part the buck stops with you, which leaves the question, who then holds you accountable?
I can't speak for the two chiefs because in this particular situation we are different. The citizens that I serve, all 100,000 of them, that's who holds me accountable, and they can hold me accountable every 4 years, just like the president or just like our county commissioners or any of our other constitutionals. I'm up for election every 4 years, and if they don't think that I'm doing a good job, then I would assume someone would come out and run against me, and then the citizens would have the final say-so in holding me accountable for that.
All right. Yeah, go ahead, Hoagland.
I think mine's a little simpler. I can be fired. I'm not under contract. I was appointed.
Who's your boss?
My direct boss essentially is the mayor for the city of Sebring, who would recommend my termination to the Sebring City Council. Sebring City Council would then weigh the circumstances, and I could get the axe, I guess, essentially.
Yeah.
Because it's through the mayor, essentially the citizens of Sebring are my accountability measure as well. If I'm not satisfying the job of my office, if I'm not doing what I should be doing, that process could be put in place for my termination.
Yeah. Chief Fansler?
Very much the same. We have a city manager who could very much recommend that I'm no longer needed. I have found myself sitting in that office a few times because, let's face it, I do find I tend to get myself in trouble a little bit because I am a type A personality, sometimes a little too forward with my opinions, and then I get reined in. So I am accountable to a city manager, mayor, council, and like Chief Hoagland said, my community. So we have bosses all over the place. Plus, I'm accountable to my officers. They can't fire me, but if you don't have the support of your staff, you might as well just pack it up and head on out.
Guys, last question before we wrap this up. Aimed really at all three of you, and quite honestly, the gravity of the questions that you've answered thus far have been significant, but for a community that is grieving together, as we watch our brothers and sisters around the country grieving together, probably one of the most significant questions that you could answer for us really springboards off of something Chief Fansler said earlier. He says, we're not these uniforms, we're men. I want to acknowledge, as a leader in this community, I understand and I respect the fact that you have a responsibility to be objective and to stay objective. You don't need to get caught up in the whirlwind of Facebook and social media and opinions. You need to stay steady, and you need to gather factual information before you lay out your opinions on things or lay down the law. But can we take the badge off for just a second while we have a community watching in, because we know that those badges can't keep your hearts from bleeding. How do you feel as men who experience real humanity, and you go through things with our community and with our country just like the rest of us? How do you guys feel right now in a time like this?
You know, this is one of those opportunities where we show vulnerability as humans. And I'm just a human and a man that happens to wear a uniform for a living. For the better part of my adult life, almost 27 years, or a little over 27 years, I've done this as a profession. This incident specifically, and of course the events that precipitated afterwards, make me angry. The incident itself when Mr. Floyd was killed certainly makes me angry because it came at the hands of a law enforcement officer, and I would argue with law enforcement officers because the other officers there seemingly did not intervene to save the man's life. we have a duty. We uphold an oath to protect people. It's something that we vow to do, we're sworn to do, and if we're not willing to do it, we shouldn't put this uniform on every day. Aside from anger, certainly there's been significant disappointment. I'm disappointed to see some of the reactions that our nation, some of the reactions that our state, the communities, and not the communities as a whole, but some of the participants within the communities have undertaken. Let's face it, you have a constitutional right to protest. You have a right to be heard. You have a right to assemble. Your voice should be heard. You don't have the right to commit domestic terrorism and burn buildings down, and you certainly don't have the right to murder other people in the face of what seemingly was a murder. Aside from that, I found that I have hope, and I have hope because of events like this. Though this may not be happening statewide, it may not be happening nationwide, if we are able to come together as a community or as representatives of our community and start to have some of these difficult conversations, to engage one another, to create this dialogue, and it not be a passing effort. This can't go away in 2 weeks. This can't go away in a month. This has to be the start of something. This has to be the spark of something that has long-term significant effect and makes a difference for our kids.
Yeah.
We have to commit to that.
Thank you, Chief.
So, well, the chief kind of hit on how long he's been in this career. So he and I went through the police academy together, I don't know, 27, 28 years ago. Same class, went through the academy together, got hired about the same time and started our careers. There's been a few things over my career, all here at the sheriff's office, that really pulls at your heartstrings, and you feel a range of different emotions, of different things, like the chief said: anger, confusion, sadness, and I don't really know how to sometimes put those in the correct words.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just so difficult. A couple examples. You mentioned it earlier. I lost one of my deputies. We had the incident at the SunTrust Bank. There's some of those issues that we see and we experience that it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
And when I saw that issue with Mr. Floyd, one, I was angered, because how could someone do that to another human being? And I, being in the position that I currently sit in, I felt for that chief up there. What must be going through his mind? As I'm sure others from around our nation and around our state felt when my deputy was killed, or when we had that, standing in the middle of 27, when we had a murderer inside the SunTrust Bank. They were probably thinking the same thing. Man, what must be going through those guys' mind? I felt the same thing for that chief. What must be going through his mind? You know, what a nightmare to wake up to, that one of your members just murdered a man for no reason.
Yeah.
And you had 3 or 4 other police officers standing there watching. So that's pretty tough. So that part of it angered me. We are just human beings. We are just men. Certainly try to live my life in a way for 3 things. I knew this was going to happen.
You're a man. It's okay.
I try to live for my God, my wife, and my son. And I just try to make all of them proud.
And you do a fine job.
Yeah.
You do a fine job.
Well, anyway, that's what I told you the other night. I didn't want to do it. So anyway, that's what I try to do. And I feel for those families that are going through that. It's got to be a tough situation. I'm confused of why some people think that it's the right thing to do to burn down buildings in their own neighborhood. Who have had families. Sometimes these businesses were, 3 and 4 generations old, and now everything has been taken away from them. So that's pretty tough. That's what confuses me. Certainly pray every day that doesn't come here.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Chief?
Not much can be said more than what the two gentlemen have said. We see things that most of the communities don't see. We deal with things so that you don't have to deal with them. We tend to absorb it over a period of several years. You internalize it and you internalize it, but it takes a situation that you see, such as the Minneapolis situation, and we see it all the time. You see it across the nation, not just with Minneapolis. We see it across the nation constantly of just bad officers taking advantage of their authority. And the words that I want to use to express it shouldn't be used in this particular building, but I can assure you that it enrages us to see that the folks that will put on those uniforms every day and call themselves protectors of their community will do the things that they do. It aggravates us to the point where we would love to address those particular individuals ourselves, but we can't. We take it upon ourselves to protect our community. And unfortunately, sometimes those communities have to be protected from folks that wear the same uniforms that we do. And we take that responsibility very seriously. So, without a doubt, you can know that the gentlemen that are sitting up on this stage and the ones that work for us, if we'd have saw a situation like that, we would have not sat idly by. If not by request, he would have been forcibly removed from Mr. Floyd. In the situations that we see across our nation, it pains us as law enforcement leaders to see such negligence and such hatred from the uniform out. Now, we're used to hearing bad things called to us and names and all the things that are associated with the uniform. We don't take them seriously because people don't know us. They're aimed at our uniform. Like I said, I learned long ago, I am not this uniform. Chief is what I do. It's not who I am. My name is James Fansler. It is not Chief of Police for the town of Lake Placid. As long as we never forget who we are inside these uniforms, I think that these communities will be very much like Lake Placid, like Sebring, Highlands County. We will continue to be a close-knit community that you know that you can come to, that you can trust, that we will have these bonds regardless of anything that exists beyond. And as long as I am chief, that partnership will continue to be extended. Each and every person, I have an open door policy that is open to anybody who's even beyond the town of Lake Placid. I don't check their IDs as they come through the door. I am here to help. I am probably one of the few in law enforcement that is completely unqualified for the position that I have. I was given my position by, and I've talked with Dustin about this, my position was given to me by God. I did not earn my position. It was given to me, and I believe it was given to me with a purpose, and that was a purpose to help as many people as I possibly can. I've sat in my office and talked to people about discussions far beyond just an issue with somebody being arrested or got a citation. I've been, and I know I'll catch some flack for this because I don't have any degrees in being a counselor, but I've sat and I've counseled families on their family matters because people feel like they can come to my office and they can trust, because I've been very open about my childhood, about the mistakes, about being arrested as a youth, about the lifestyle that I lived before I became a law enforcement officer. But I truly believe that helped me become very good at what I do. It helps me to sit across the table and to relate with who I'm talking to. Because how often can you sit across the desk from, this isn't a gloating situation, this is a truthful statement, that you have a chief, or many times as an investigator, as I grew up in the department, who has been on your side of the table and looks back and can truthfully say, I know what you're feeling. I know what feelings you're having. I know what you're dealing with inside. And occasionally I'll get that, no you don't. And then I lay out my life story for them briefly. I give them the condensed version. We all walk a path for a very specific reason. Mine was to help people. And as long as I breathe, as long as my heart beats, that is exactly what I will continue to do. And inside my organization, that's what you'll get from every one of my officers, every one of my staff members. You'll get that same, because I try to impress that upon them, and I don't have to do it very hard because I got a great group that work with me, and it's just a fantastic career. It saddens me that anybody will ever use it as a weapon.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, gentlemen, for your candor and your transparency, and that's real. It means something to us to be able to feel those feelings with you. That's for sure, and to know that you feel what the people that we love in our own community feel. There was a clarifying question that came in that I need to ask, because apparently in the discussion tonight, that sparked enough interest on social media that there is a contingent of people that are wanting to start a GoFundMe account for body cams. So would you throw that number out again? Exactly how much are we looking at to have body cams countywide?
Which,
Yeah,
I should up it, you know.
clarify that again?
Countywide? Countywide?
Yeah, countywide full cost and a realistic way to contribute.
Between 1.5 and 2.5 million dollars is what it's going to cost, somewhere in there. And they would write a check to the Highlands County Sheriff's Office with, in the comment section, body cams, and we'll make sure that we get it there.
Would that be annually?
That's a startup fee, yes.
That's the startup fee. So
to get us going.
That's good. So, and I know that like GoFundMe takes a little bit of a fee. So bring your contributions directly to the Sheriff's Department if you're wanting to contribute to that. Let's wrap up our conversation this evening. And as a community of people, we're so thankful that you've taken the time to lean in to this conversation with us. I'm the preacher on the stage. I wanted to leave you with this. Romans chapter 12, verse 9 and 10 says these words that I think are the declaration and the prayer that I have right now over this community. It says, "Let love be genuine, hate what is evil, and cling to what is good. Love one another with a brotherly affection, and outdo one another in showing honor." What a great battle cry for us, as we are a community that's not just trying to figure out how to get past this. We want to be a community that never comes back to this point in history again. Gentlemen, I thank you for your leadership in our community. Panel, I thank you for your leadership in our community, and thank you for stepping up on stage this evening and sharing in this time with Highlands County. We love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free to contact your local agencies if you have any further questions, and God bless you all.